Hello and welcome to 10 Lessons It Took Me 50 Years to Learn, where we dispense wisdom to an international audience of rising leaders. My name is Diana White and I'm your host. This podcast is sponsored by the Professional Development Forum, which helps diverse young professionals of any age accelerate their performance in the modern workplace. On this podcast, you'll hear honest, practical advice that you cannot learn from a textbook. Today's guest is Eric Miller. Eric is a co-founder of Tempe-based PADT Inc., a provider of tools and services to companies that design and manufacture physical products. He holds a BS in mechanical engineering from UC Berkeley and started his career focusing on applying computer-aided engineering to turbine engine components. As a co-founder of PADT in 1994, Eric also pursued IT, graphic design, 3D printing, database programming, HR, and small business management. Eric is also often called upon to write and speak on simulation, design, and 3D printing. He is also steeply involved with the startup community and the high-tech sector. Eric hosts the podcast All Things ANSYS. He is currently chair of the Arizona Technology Council Board of Directors, a member of the Arizona Technology Investor Screening Committee, and serves on several advisory boards. Eric also serves as an entrepreneur in residence at the Arizona Commerce Authority and mentors through multiple startup incubators, including Chandler Innovations and the Clean Tech Open. He regularly contributes to the Phoenix Business Journal with articles about technology, small business, and the Arizona ecosystem. Eric also moonlights as a freelance writer. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. First of all, I don't know how you do it all. I really, really don't.
Well, I'm an insomniac, so that helps. So like that writing gig that I do, it's not too often, but when I do it, it's late at night, and I let them know that you're going to be getting edits at 2:00 in the morning. So
Oh, there you go. It makes sense. So we're going to get started with your lessons in a moment, but I've got a question for you.
Mhm.
What would you, I know it's only been about 5 years since you've seen that age, right? But
Uh,
what would you tell your 30-year-old self?
don't wait.
Don't wait.
I think that the lesson that we all learn when we're in our I just turned into what I consider my late 50s now, is that, you hesitate next month, next week, next year, we'll do this after this, and we'll wait until this happens. And then you realize you spent a lot of time doing other things. And maybe that's why that list is so long, right? I stopped waiting. I want to do that. I want to mentor those folks, and I want to do some writing on the side. I want to do this. And so instead of waiting for the right time, I just started doing it all.
And finding a balance to be able to do it all so that nothing really suffers, which I admire so much about you.
I stick to stuff that I'm good at. Stay with stuff I'm not. That helps.
That's the key, right? That's the key. So let's start with your first lesson.
Mhm.
Communication is so important and drives everything. And then you have another sentence here. You need to learn to keep things short and not be afraid to ask questions. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah. So I didn't really understand how important communication was until it was too late, really, in a lot of situations. And when I was young in my career, I didn't really recognize that a lot of times there were failures to get things done because of poor communication. And poor communication could take the form of people don't talk, or they don't communicate, or they take so long to communicate that people stop listening. And communication is also about asking questions, right? So it's that free flow of information. And kind of the epiphany for me when I was younger, and I didn't sit in as much as it should, is I was working with two engineers. I was helping them, two very different disciplines, and I was kind of the middleman between the two of them. And they weren't communicating, and things were going slowly. We were making mistakes, and we were doing things wrong. And so I finally went down to go talk to one of them, and I realized they shared a cubicle, and yet they didn't talk to each other. They never spoke to each other. And that was kind of just being close to people. You have to be proactive about it. And you have to accept the fact that you have to communicate, get good at communication, and get good at listening, which is of course an important part of communication as well. It's served me well. And a lot of what I do is communicating. A lot of those roles we talked about in my bio are really about sharing information effectively and efficiently.
It always occurs to me, people assume that communication is listening and then giving your response. And it's so difficult to teach people that communication, it's an active thing.
Mm.
It's something you have to really learn how to do. You have to learn how to communicate up and down. You have to learn how to communicate with your colleagues. It's a hard skill. And sometimes it's a really tough lesson if you're a leader and you don't have that skill yet.
One of the things I've seen with leaders is they don't realize that they're not communicating, right? They sent the email, they gave the speech, they had the one-on-one with the employee. That doesn't mean you communicated. And I think a lot of it goes to emotional intelligence, right? When you're communicating, you got to pick up on those cues, especially as a leader. Is it sinking through? Is it causing frustration? Is it causing anger? Are they, try and read, because when you're a leader, people tell you what you want to hear, right? And they don't give you that feedback. So you got to find the feedback.
So true. Lesson number two, never understate the importance of a strong network and how proactive you have to be to maintain that network.
Yeah. Wow. In business and in life, but especially in business, right? We're here having this discussion right now because you're part of my network, right? And it's an important part. People call up and they need something, or if the bigger your network, the easier it is for you to help other people, and easier it is for other people to help you. And it's important in our business, my business, we sell tools to engineers, and we also do consulting, engineering consulting. And that's a trust business. That's a relationship business, right? And it's not a commodity, the kind of software and hardware we sell. So networks are so important. And like the other day, in almost a year now, we got a significant design project for a company that you wouldn't think does design, right? Because of NDAs, I can't get into what they do, but they're not an industry you would go, oh, they have a bunch of engineers. Well, they do have a few, and they came up with a product that would help what they do out there in the world work better. And they didn't know who, because they're not an engineering company, they're not a manufacturing company. They didn't know who to talk to in Arizona to get their work done. So they were talking to a person who was friends with a person in economic development who I've gone to events with and hung out and never really thought, they're focused on getting people to move here and sell buildings to them, right?
Right.
But that person said, oh, you need to talk to Eric Miller at PADT. This is what they do. Boom. A few phone calls later, we're helping them solve their problem. So it always makes me happy when these connections pay off, and they pay off in so many different ways, in friendships, in getting new employees and getting work, and helping the community as a whole grow. And that's been an important part of what I've tried to do during COVID, is try and be more of a connector so that we continue to grow the Arizona tech community, even though we're not going to meetings and we're not talking to each other face to face. And the minute I slowed down on that, it fell apart. People were going out of town for hiring people. Opportunities that I could have helped with didn't come up. So you just got to keep it going, keep it going, keep it going.
You and I both live in Arizona, and we saw the effects of going all virtual and what that did to relationships and networking and partnerships. And I have to say, though, we rallied together, and we tried to continue pushing forward. And before, if 1,000 people showed up to a physical event, that meant that maybe only 720 showed up to an online event. I've attended many of your events. You were still the same Eric, and I still got the same amount of gratification out of going to those events. So
Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge for us to learn how to do it, and we trial and errored for a while, but it's about creating connections.
for sure.
That's
Number three, what you learned in kindergarten works, especially the golden rule and learning to walk a mile in other people's shoes.
Yeah, I don't know if they taught my kids that in kindergarten, but these were kind of the core of some of these life lessons. Besides how to tie your shoes, that they taught us in kindergarten, and it really stuck with me, and it still sticks with me. And that sometimes we'll be in a meeting and we're trying, well, what should we do? It's a sticky situation. We've got two options. What should we do? And this idea of having empathy towards others, and how would I want to be treated in the situation? Right? It's a business decision where we could go this place, but it's kind of we may go with company B, but company A, it's going to screw them, and the money isn't that big of a difference. So what would I do? Well, how would I want to be treated? Well, I have that relationship with company A. Let's stick with company A. because we built that relationship there. And the other that's really important is that walking a mile in other people's shoes. And I think it was one of those posters of with moccasins or something like that on it. Or it was right next to the cat hanging on, right? So, um,
Did we all have that in
I
our
think we all
classroom?
did in the classroom. I think Scholastic was the propaganda machine, right?
Mhm.
So, but gosh, that pays off so many times because from a leadership standpoint, you're working with an employee and there's something wrong. You don't quite know why they're not getting it or why they're not responding or why they're not performing. And until you've walked a mile in their shoes, you don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. You can make all the assumptions in the world, but until you understand where they're coming from and what's going on at home, what's going on in their cubicle, what's going on in their mind, what kind of anxiety, like right now, we really have to be sensitive to the amount of anxiety that people have hidden inside of them because COVID and now the war in
Right.
Ukraine creates a huge amount of uncertainty and anxiety, and people don't necessarily talk about it. And that may be why they're not paying attention to you or they're just not getting it. So trying to walk in their shoes really pays off. Yeah, those are great life lessons. I should probably find those posters somewhere on eBay and hang them up in the building.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of your lessons really do tie into each other. And when I see that in a guest, it just leads me to believe that these are lessons that were cultivated over time, but it's core to their personality. It's core to who they are. And when I read through them, and for our listeners and our viewers, yes, I get a sneak peek before you guys do. Sorry about that. But I said, this is Eric. This is absolutely, he practices what he's preaching right now. So lesson number 4. People and situations change over time, and it's a small world. Give yourself flexibility to adjust or walk away from relationships, and don't burn bridges.
Well, I learned that one the hard way a couple times where
We all
I
have.
didn't live up to the golden rule. And especially when I was younger, you talk to my friends, I would say a little arrogant. I was arrogant at times. And when I was unhappy with somebody, I would kind of burn that bridge. I was kind of snitty about it and burn that bridge. Well, some of those folks, in fact, one person that I remember, this is such a nerd thing, but we got into a fight about who got into the queue on the supercomputer first. And
Ooh.
he snuck in front of me and it was like, I was really mad at him and I burned that bridge. And it was very, looking back, it was childish, but I burned that bridge. Well, he's the CEO of one of the fastest growing solar companies in the Southwest.
Mm.
And fortunately, he's a bigger man than me and he could care less that I did that. And they become a good customer. But that bridge could have really burned me. And, when you're young, you don't really realize it. And that's certainly a lesson I learned over time is it's a very small world. And that side of it of don't burn those bridges because you don't know who you might need to work with in the future or might need to help you in the future. On the other side of that point about being able to walk away, that's something else I struggled with, right? We can fix this. We can fix this. And toxic people and toxic employees are deadly. And they don't just hurt you, they hurt that toxic person and they hurt other employees. So, being flexible and adjusting or walking away from relationships has been a tough lesson to learn, but has paid off for everybody when I finally do it. Yeah.
I go back to one of my lessons because I was also interviewed on the podcast. And one of my lessons was be prepared to walk away, but also be prepared that no one will ask you to stay. There's so many times in business and personal relationships, anything you can think of where, we almost try to subconsciously get a sense of validation from if I put my line in the sand, if you cross it, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. I'm out of here.
Or it's my way or the highway,
Yeah.
right? We have so many different phrases and cliches about that whole, it's me, me, me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to say, for the sake of everybody's mental well-being, we need to just agree to disagree and move on.
That's a really important. You're so right about that. And I'm not a competitive person, so I don't have to win all the time. So I think that's an advantage that I have. It's a disadvantage too, because sometimes I don't try as hard as I should. But I've dealt with people like that are just like, I'm right, or the world comes to an end, and that's not the flexibility that a leader needs.
I don't know who said this, so audience, please don't come for me for stealing a quote, but is that, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy?
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I
We'll
get it.
attribute it to Einstein. That seems to be the popular thing.
Hey, for
Or Lincoln.
sure.
Einstein or
For Lincoln. Exactly.
Lincoln.
All right. So number 5,
Mhm.
know your own bias. This is a good one.
It's really good. It's interesting. It's come up very recently in that because I don't have enough to do. I'm actually taking a class on writing, and we're learning to read right now, and we're sharing our analysis of the chapter, and everybody has a completely different point of view on what the author's trying to say, and just brought home that of we're all bringing our biases, right? So, my bias, the way I look at things is from the view of an engineer is very matter of fact and very logical. You know, and there's ghosts in this story. So there's no such thing as ghosts. So therefore the author is saying that, our own imagination fills in these gaps, and other people are like, ghosts are such an important part of the ecosystem and blah, blah, blah. And it just has to do with your biases and where your point of view comes from. And that's so true in business, right? Because you can be in a negotiation or you could be trying to get a project done, and where you set your priorities and how you respond is so based on your bias. And it may not be where you want to go. Your goals may be over here and your bias is driving you over to the left. You got to be aware of it and be conscious of it and adjust and sometimes ignore that bias.
Would you also agree that sometimes your bias gets in the way of who you bring on your team, the talent
Yeah.
you bring in on your
Yeah.
team?
The obvious bias is profiling, right?
Oh, yeah.
And negative and positive, right? There's, that smart kid in school kind of had a name like this person, and I see that on a resume, and I'm like, oh, well, I knew a person with that same last name, so that's one extreme. Or ethnicity and religion and background and how people look. And so one of the things I do to avoid bias is when I interview folks, I don't read their resume first
Oh,
because my bias got really strong based on the resume, right? Where they worked, where they went to school. I'm really bad. I'm really a snob about that. And I was realizing that it was really biasing my opinion of them. So no camera, let's just talk and get a feel for each other before I look at your resume, or tell me about your history and your past and things like that. So that's one way I overcame that particular bias that was pretty strong in me. And it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle. And prejudging people and assuming the way they're going to behave based upon that bias can really get you in trouble.
I know you're a writer. Write a book about that. What you just said was gold. Absolute
Write it down.
gold.
Write it down.
Write it down. And I've not heard of anyone else in a position that you are that says, when I interview somebody, I don't look at their resume first. That is a first for me. And I've been in this game a really long time. I think that is a fabulous way to do things because the truth will come out, right? They're going to talk about it. You'll find commonalities or you'll find things that aren't common for what they bring to the organization. That piece of paper isn't the end all be all. I think that's amazing.
So true. So true. And there's a lot of other examples where we just got to be aware of it and let us come to the right decision and not let our bias take us down the path we should go.
There you go. There you go. All right. Number 6.
Mhm.
This got me because sometimes this happens to me and I'm still working on this. Number 6, feelings should guide you, not constrain you.
Yeah. And for me, it's anger, right? Or frustration. And they're close for me. So that's on the negative side, right? And on the positive side, we have millions of years of evolution. We're pretty good animals at using feelings to make decisions. They're there for a reason, and they've evolved for a reason. And we should use them to help guide us on things. But the problem is when they kick in to where the adrenaline starts going, or the sadness starts going, or whatever it is, or the feeling, a big one that everybody struggles with, right, is insecurity, right? So everybody has a little bit of imposter syndrome, and some people, I have a lot of it actually. And so it's a constant battle for me to not let that feeling overcome me and constrain me. But at the same time, acknowledge it. It's there. Why is it there? Oh, well, I feel like I'm outclassed by this group of people, or they don't really understand what my background is, or something like that. So then address it, overcome it. There's so many areas that this plays a role in business and in human relations. And we try to be Spock, right? We try to be logical. And it doesn't always work. We were interviewing some folks a couple of weeks ago, and the hiring manager was just like, I just have a feeling. I have a gut feeling this is a good hire. And I'm like, well, go with that. Because when I've ignored my gut, I've been wrong more often And then I use my logic to justify my bias, basically.
I think my crutch is I always seem to have this sense of urgency. Like, this has to be solved. This has to get done because all of this other stuff is coming down the pipeline. We got it. We got it. We got it. We got to.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people that fall into that trap of trying to run literally speed of light through life instead of just slowing down a little bit and understanding where all this is coming from and how they feel about it and what's coming up, unconsciously for them.
Fear is such a powerful tool and such a dangerous thing as well, right? We make so many decisions based on fear that we shouldn't. And then at the other time we ignore it sometimes because you have fear for a reason. Your brain is telling you, run away, fight or flight. There's a reason why you're feeling fear in a situation. But then when you let it overwhelm you and guide you and don't make decisions because of fear, that's the downside.
All right. Number 7, be able to do, or at least understand your employee's job and pitch in when you can. And this goes back to some of the other lessons that you had, walking a mile in the other person's shoes, learning how to communicate. Tell me about this lesson.
So this is one I learned from my first boss. When I was an intern in college, I worked at a large aerospace company, and they didn't have anything, interny for me to do. So they let me do real engineering work. And the fact that my boss, who was pretty high up, was able to sit down and do some of the work with me made me feel like he understood what I was doing. It made me feel like what I was doing was valued as well. And probably the biggest impact was he was able to answer my questions, right? So it's not something you can always do, especially in highly technical fields. There's certain things now that I just don't know anymore and I can't do. But being able to sit down, we had a new engineer join us, and she was trying to figure out something in one of the pieces of software we use. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. And I feel, she was starting to feel kind of like she didn't belong. So I said, well, let's bring it up and let's work through it together. And by working through it with her over virtual environment, which I love, we were able to not just figure it out, but her to know that I understood why she was struggling and why it was difficult, and help understand that. And the other reason why I really like it is it's not a black box. And when things aren't going right, and if you don't understand what's going on inside the box, you can't help fix it. And then I see this in managers that don't understand what their people do. All they do is yell. You didn't make the deadline. You suck. You need to get this fixed now. You've got till tomorrow to get it fixed, rather than, okay, let's look at why are we not done? And when they start explaining it, being able to understand what they're talking about, even if it's from a high level, and help guide them towards a solution rather than, being this autocratic, you need to fix it. And I think that comes from really not understanding what people are doing.
So true. I have come across some leaders, right, who understand what the other person is doing. They have a grasp of it because they've mastered it. And now it becomes a point of they don't remember what it was like to learn it. They've mastered it. So it's like, why is it taking you so long to do this? I could do this in my sleep.
That's the flip side. And it's a habit I had to break was I'll just do it myself.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
It's one, I don't have the time. 2, I'm probably not the best person to do it. Sometimes I am. And in that case, I'll roll up my sleeves and do it. But working with the team. But what it really says is you're not good enough to your employees. And that's not good.
That's not a good culture. Not a good culture. Okay. So speaking of company culture, let's move into number 8 here, which I love. Letting people go is good for their coworkers, for them, and for your company. Now, how often do you get to write a sentence that says letting people go is good for everybody?
Yep.
Like, that's an oxymoron, is it not? But tell me about this.
So I think, and I asked an administrative person I work with that helped me with some of the administrative tasks, including HR, what's my biggest fault? And her response was, you don't fire people soon enough. Because I hate conflict. I hate conflict. And there's very little that you can do in business that has more conflict than firing somebody for cause. Right? There's not a lot. And so I took the typical approach that a lot of passive aggressive people do, is that we'll just let them leave on their own. And I was never one of those, and I know managers do this, that purposely make people miserable.
Hmm.
So they'll leave. I never did that, but I was just kind of like, It'll work itself." I kind of had this philosophy, it'll work itself out. It doesn't work itself out. And what this person said to me that would help me with HR stuff was, "What you don't get, Eric, is everyone around them is miserable.
Right.
And so you want to give them another chance. You hope they leave on their own. You want to avoid the conflict of cutting them off, but you've lost credibility with other employees because you let them get away with this stuff. They're miserable. They don't want to come to work. You're miserable. And guess what? That employee is miserable. And sometimes, there's different reasons why people need to be let go. And sometimes and most of the time, it's the wrong fit. It's not, there's nothing inherently, I don't believe in inherent evil, but there's nothing wrong with them. They're not a bad person, but they just don't belong in your culture. They don't belong in the position from a technical standpoint. They don't belong in the position from a responsibility standpoint. It's just not a good fit. And keeping that is not good. Sometimes, yeah, you look at, and they changed jobs 4 times in the last 4 years, that it wasn't me, it was them. But, sometimes it's not a good fit. And I like to give it a try. I like to, okay, if it's not a good fit, let's find. One of the things we used to do, and we were really bad about this, is if somebody wasn't a good fit, we'd move them, and then we'd move them, and we'd move them. And a third of the time, one move fixed it. But most of the time, it wasn't that they weren't a good fit for the job. They weren't a good fit for the company. And yeah, that's huge. And that's when people ask me, what's the one advice you would give to somebody starting a new company? It's going to be in leadership. That's always would fire people sooner rather than later.
Yeah, again, another adage that we can contribute to Einstein or Lincoln, right?
Exactly.
Hire slow, fire fast,
Fast.
right?
Exactly.
But it does make sense. And I've seen many of an extremely healthy culture be destroyed by one person, which it's amazing to me that one person who isn't even trying to have
Yeah,
the power
right.
holds that power.
Yeah, the human dynamics are really, really sensitive, and we saw that once with an employee that there was no reason to let them go, but the company had changed and they had not.
Mm.
Let's put it that way. And they weren't happy about it, and they kind of grumbled a lot about it. And that was kind of their persona. It was kind of a grumbler. And we had these stand-up meetings, and the day after the stand-up meeting, it was like this, like the sun was shining from the rafters. Everybody was just more cheerful and happier. And when we bring up, it's a lot of things, times in stand-up meetings, you bring up problems, and instead of going, "Oh," it was like, "Okay, well, I can help you with that." And it just changed the whole mentality of the group. So sometimes it's not even about, them violating your HR policies. It's just that they just don't bring the right vibe to the team.
Very true. All right. Number 9, take the time to learn your tools.
Yeah, this is actually a core philosophy of our company. So before we even started the company, we sat down and said, we wanted to be different than the corporate environment that we were coming from. And so what are our core philosophies? And one of the ones that I really fought for strongly was take the time to learn your tools, because I had spent the early part of my career trying to find the best tools. I get a better pair of scissors. I can cut this paper faster. But if I would have learned how to cut right, I would have cut the paper faster. And it took me a while to learn that. And when I did, it became core to our company. And it really is part of our philosophy, and it's paid well, because a lot of times efficiency is not down because people don't know how to do something or they have the wrong tool. They just don't know how to use the tool. No one's taken the time to train them. They haven't taken the time to learn it. And, sometimes I find myself taking 10 minutes to learn a new feature. I've been using Excel since I was a junior in college. So that's 1985, right? On a Mac, the original version on the Mac. And I learn new things in Excel all the time. And I got to take the time to learn this new function, this new capability, because I may not need it today, but 6 months from now, I'm going to, oh, I know how to do that, and do it. So, taking that time to learn pays off, and not just software, which is what we're focused on, right, as engineers, but the tools of management, the tools of human interaction, how you communicate, how you emote, how you mentor, right? That's a tool, and learn those tools well. And that's much better than trying to find the perfect tool, and can be the biggest bang for the buck out there.
I agree. I used to have a mentor that would tell me the analogy of the paperweight, and that goes for anything. It doesn't have to be a tangible, physical product. It could be mental. It could be a skill set. It could be an app. It could be anything. If you buy into it, if you purchase it, if you get training on it, and then it just ends up sitting there becoming a paperweight, that was such a waste of time. And that makes you think a lot about what tools you do bring into your
Yes.
life,
Yes.
what tools you are comfortable learning because you don't have time to fill your brain with paperweights.
That's so
So
true. That's so true. I'll go into one of my pet peeves, which is CRM systems, customer relationship management systems, right? So these are amazing tools that can do everything you want. And most people use them as a Rolodex. And I always use that as an example in business of a tool where if people would just learn to use 5% more of that tool, they'd be their sales would go up, their productivity would go up, their customers would be happy. And it's a great example. And for a lot of people, it's a very expensive paperweight that just sits there on their computer and they look up phone numbers on it or email addresses on it.
all right, we're heading up to number 10, and then I got a curveball after that
Okay.
one. So, number 10, understand the real and perceived value of whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, this is getting a little bit into the weeds. And sometimes when I'm working with startups, really get into this because it's really, really important to understand what you want to accomplish. Let's do something simple. Like let's go back to cutting paper, right? So what is the real value of you cutting that paper? Before you invest in more scissors, learning how to use the scissors, getting the right paper, writing a procedure to cut the paper, what's the value? What's the real value of you doing that? And then you have to look at the rest of the organization, your customer, the organization, whatever that network is that's impacted by you cutting that paper. And how do they perceive that value, right? So if your customers perceive your paper cutting as the most important thing you do, or even if it's not, you should probably invest time and money in that, right? Because the perception is more important than real. But you got to know the real value because if you don't know the real value, you can't fix things, you can't optimize, you can't get where you want to go.
Right.
You gotta really know both and know the difference between both. And that's true in sales, that's true in management, it's true in engineering, it's true in personal relationships. And the disconnect between perceived and real is where a lot of businesses really struggle. And they perceive the value in a certain way, but the real value is totally different. And they put all their time and effort in the perceived value, and they end up with a real value that the market doesn't respond to.
And as an entrepreneur in residence, as an advisor, as a mentor, how do you work with these founders that they're totally off base with what's perceived and what they wanted the value to be? You and I both have come across founders that are, I created this to be used a certain way. That is how the world will use it. And that is all I'm going to talk about.
You mean doctors?
I'm not calling any profession out here.
Sorry.
We love you, doctors.
You do, especially when I went on the operating table.
Exactly.
But it's true in and I stereotype. That's my bias. I think you have to get to basics, right? Of what I generally go, and this is engineering training mainly, is the root causes, right? So let's say you are with a doctor and this is very common when we develop medical devices, is a doctor will develop a medical device because they want to do a procedure a certain way, but they happen to be the only one that wants to do it that way. But there's a lot of value in the product. And if you can get them to accept the fact that it can be used in different ways, you can get significant benefits for patients and financial benefits. And so what we try to do is the root cause. What is this procedure for? Why do you want to do this? Okay. All those exercises of asking why. So you want to remove the gallbladder faster. I don't know. So no, don't go to your solution. So what's keeping you from removing it fast right now? Oh, well, your device actually solves these 4 problems as well as the problem you care about. Okay, let's do some research. Let's talk to some other people. Well, people care more about those. The real value is those 2 of those other 4 values. Oh, okay. And you got to get ego out of the way. And each person is different. Sometimes that doesn't work with folks. Sometimes you just got to, some people respond to just being forceful. And I've done that before. Look, no one's going to fund you unless you change your value proposition. It's not going to happen. You will not get funded. And they storm off, they go out, they don't get funded. And then they come back and they go, okay, what should I change my value proposition to do? And if you can guide them to the answer themselves, it's always better. But if you can't, sometimes you got to be forceful. I think it goes back to some of the other things we talked about, or you got to understand, you got to walk in their shoes, you got to understand what their priorities are and look at your own biases. That's the thing I have to deal with, is because I look at it from a certain perspective, but what are their biases as well, and adjust all of those. And and try and do it. Sometimes we'll go back to the one about sometimes you have to fire them, right? We're not going anywhere on this one, so let's move on. But don't burn the bridge, because they may figure it out, come back.
Exactly, for sure. Eric, I already knew when you agreed to come on the podcast that you would have some amazing lessons, and I wasn't disappointed. This has been fabulous, but I can't let you go away with just I got to give you a curveball.
Okay.
You've had a lot of experience. You've got a lot of wisdom, and you've gone through a lot of transformation. We all have. What have you had to unlearn in your life?
Yeah, so a lot. I think the biggest one is to not be so hard on myself.
Mm.
You know?
Teach me.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I don't know of a lot. I mean, people are driven by a lot of different things, and a lot of people are driven by being hard on themselves. And it took me a long time to realize that that's not the only way to drive yourself forward. And I think I'm not there. I'll admit, yeah, it's a constant battle. I got to take that voice sometimes and put it on the shelf and tell it to shut up for a little while. But it's still there talking on the shelf. It's, you make a simple mistake and you're that angry at yourself. Yeah, I do that every day, and I'm still unlearning that. I'm unlearning that capability. Hopefully, and it's much better. Yeah, it's much better than it used to be. And it allows me to move forward. And that's the problem with being hard on yourself. It can be a way to teach, but it slows you down. It really slows you down. It's not fun.
And it's not fun. And I will say I've had, several talks with myself. Would you talk to your daughter this way? Are you kidding me? Would you talk to your mentee this way? Would you talk to somebody that reports to you this way? I mean, this is ghastly what you're doing inside your brain here. And sometimes it works. Sometimes I get a wake up call and I'm like, wait a minute, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't be doing this. And sometimes I'm just too far gone.
Once you get over that, I always say once the brain chemicals start going, I just got to write it out. But that's exactly what I do is in work situations when I'm like, I love to program, and I don't do it. I don't do it anymore, and I really miss it. But one of the problems with programming is when there was a bug and I found it, I would get really mad at myself. And then I remember I was coaching somebody that was a new engineer, helping them debug something, and they're like, "Don't you get mad at yourself? Don't you get mad when you find these bugs?" I mean, I get so mad, and I'm like, with them, I wasn't getting mad, and I thought, wait a second, I get horribly angry with myself. So it's like exactly what you're exactly right. It's how would I treat somebody else? I guess it goes back to the golden rule. The opposite, is that a corollary golden rule? Instead of treat others like you'd like to be treated, treat yourself like others would treat you.
That's what Lincoln said.
No, that's what Lincoln said. We'll put it next to a picture of him and put a quote Abraham Lincoln, and now it's done.
That's right.
But, yeah, I think it's really important, and now that's the thing I've unlearned the most, and then I have more unlearning to do.
Sounds good. So before we wrap this up, Eric, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, where we can find you. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Eric Millers out there. So if you do Eric Miller and then our company name, PADT, I'll show right up there. And that's really the best way. I unless you are blatantly trying to sell me leads, I will probably friend you or link to you on LinkedIn. Our website is www.padtinc.com. And the podcast, if you are in that small demographic of simulation users out there, it's called All Things ANSYS. And we're the only ANSYS podcast, so it's easy to find. Also, I'll put a plug in for please subscribe to the Business Journal if you do live in Phoenix. Every month I do a column if I'm on schedule, and their topics are some of the stuff we talked about today and everything in between, including my favorite article is how waterless urinals work. It's always fascinating on how that happens.
Love it. And I'll put a disclaimer out there that because we're international, you don't have to live in Arizona. Phoenix Business Journal is online as well, and there's a lot of great things coming out of Arizona and coming out of Greater Phoenix. So you're absolutely right. It's a good publication to subscribe to.
Yeah, and read all my ghostwritten articles, which you won't be able to tell what they are because my name's not on them.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that for sure.
But if it's really good and insightful, I read it.
Either you or Einstein.
That's right. Einstein.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. I'm gonna close this out. You've been listening to 10 Lessons It Took Me 50 Years to Learn, sponsored by the Professional Development Forum. PDF provides webinars, social media, discussions, podcasts, parties, and it's all free. Visit professionaldevelopmentforum.org to learn more. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to 10 Lessons. We also appreciate your feedback, so follow us on social media and engage. Thank you once again, Eric Miller, and thanks to the audience. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.